Value Matters conference online. So it's been a great opportunity to bring people around the world or from around the world together who might never have had the opportunity to participate in these sessions. So that is fantastic. And we are very excited to get started today with a discussion on homelessness in Australia, which will be hosted by our wonderful speaker, Rachel Christie. So I'll turn it over to her in a second. But just a reminder that the session will be recorded, so you can come back and view it at your leisure. And if you have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat box, and then we will address them when we take a break for some questions later. So with that, over to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Brett. I'm Rachel. I'm from Sydney, and I work for Mission Australia. Today we're going to talk about homelessness and wellbeing in Australia. And we'll talk through a little about Mission Australia's method, how we actually did that in practice. So I think it'll be quite practical, the first session. And then we're going to talk more about the findings later. So if you're watching online, not in the live, you could probably, if you want to just go straight to the punchline, you could probably do that at about in about 30 minutes. So I just want to, first of all, acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I'm on, and acknowledge them as the custodians and the first people here in Australia. Pay my respects to elders past, present and future. And at Mission Australia and across Australia, we recognise that Aboriginal people are, hold the memories, dreams and hopes and for this land. And from where I am in Sydney, I'm on Gamagal land. And so if you're on First Nations land, I'd encourage you to put in your chat what country you're on. It'd be great to hear and see some other First Nations countries pop up. So a little bit today about what the content will look like from me is about, for those non-Australians, we'll talk about homelessness in Australia for a little bit. I'll also talk about the organisational, this is a large-scale project, was a large-scale project, and it's a major change change management piece that's happened for us over the last number of years. And so I think from a practitioner's point of view, I think there is something that I always find when we share about this, that other practitioners are interested in the how. Tell me how you do this in an organization, tell me how you do this, and stuff like that. So, disclaimer one, I'm not an academic, never have been, and I don't work in government either. And so really interested in primarily the usefulness of wellbeing information for a not-for-profit, for a large not-for-profit. And I suppose everything is really the way that we make decisions, and the way that I particularly think about doing work is really about, is this going to be useful? Because as we know, we're all in a resource-strained environment. And and so I'll cover along the how for the first bit. We'll break for questions. I'm really I like people. If this was live, we'd be talking a whole lot more. So we've got two sections for questions. One about after the kind of the method, and then we'll do we'll dive into some of the findings, and then you can go straight to we'll go have questions as well. So I encourage you to, if you've got any questions as I go through, put them in the chat. Brett will moderate them once we get to the sections, but just really ask me. I'm an open book. And thanks, Brett, for saying you're on the traditional territory of Blackfoot Confederacy. And yeah, that's very cool. Never been to Canada. Like to. So let's just start on the context of homelessness in Australia and where Mission Australia fits. Mission Australia is a large charity here in Australia. We've operated here for over 160 years. Last year we supported over 150,000 individuals through about 480 programs. So we're really about supporting homelessness, people experiencing homelessness, as well as ensuring that people can thrive. So so we do a lot of things, but we're really in the space of homelessness. We do a lot of mental health and things that kind of the causal factors for homelessness, things like mental health and alcohol and drug addictions and things like that. So we kind of, while we operate in the homelessness space, we also work a lot with people who are in some of those causes of homelessness. So as far as homelessness goes in Australia, the census in 2016, there were 116,000 plus people experiencing homelessness. And this isn't just street sleeping. This is all sorts of things like street sleeping, but also couch surfing or really overcrowded dwellings. Some stats about Australia. Some of the major causes for us here are family and domestic violence. 40% of people who look for accommodation in specialist homelessness services have experienced family and domestic violence. And we also struggle a lot with housing affordability here. And there's just not enough supply, and what is available is too expensive. And so we're really in a position of housing stress and housing crisis here. And that's actually the root cause of a whole lot of our problems around homelessness. So just to talk about measuring wellbeing in Mission Australia. And I feel like, I'm not sure, Di, what your role is, but I feel like you probably would have some contribution to add on. You might have contribution to add about Australian context, but we can get there in the questions. I guess measuring wellbeing at Mission Australia, like, how do you do it? How do you take 160,000 people a year and 480 programs and thousands of staff, and how do you actually do measure well-being? Let's talk about that, because I think until you talk about this, it can be a bit difficult to conceptualize actually the scale, because it's not a university, it's not a controlled environment, and we live in the real world. So so I think this is a really important thing to talk about. Before we get into the what and the how, and then how to practically actually get that happening, I need to go to Simon Sinek and talk about why, because I think a lot of organizations who talk to me about outcomes measurement and integrating an outcomes framework within their business or with their NGO at scale. It's like, how do you get adoption? How do you get people to actually, you're actually asking them to do something additional in their work. You might be adding an additional process or something like that. And so actually, you've got to really nail the why to be able to get adoption and get people to take it up. And so some people I find, and one of the mistakes early on for us was not really nailing the why from the very beginning. Every single rollout and every single conversation we have about why would you measure well-being? Why would you even measure outcomes? And unless you can really get your people to understand the why for something like this, you're actually never going to be able to reach scale. And so why do we measure well-being? So this is the stuff we talk about, and it can't just be lip service either. It needs to be honestly, truly what you're going to do with it. We measure well-being because we honestly believe that well-being is important, and that it needs to, and that it maximizes client outcomes. And even though they might be accessing our services because they're homeless, and their first kind of most desperate need is a home or a roof over their head, that actually thinking about their well-being in the context of their immediate crisis can actually get better longer-term outcomes. And we'll talk about that later in the presentation, and how we've come to understand that. It also, we've found for the effectiveness of the services, to make sure that it's a holistic service, and that our services are not just not just putting a band-aid on a problem and sending people out back into the world. And we have to break this cycle of multiple people coming back into homelessness or coming back into alcohol and drug rehabs or whatever. And so to be able to change our service design and that change of service offering is really important. And we can use that, and I'll talk more about that as well, but about how to actually modify the services design or offering to be able to make it more, to amplify people's well-being in that. Staff motivation is a really big thing. We've really noticed that, people who they know they're doing good work, but to actually see numbers and to see a kind of quantifiable evidence that their people are better, their clients or the people that they're working with are better because of their interactions with them. I can't tell you, there's been people moved to tears because they're like, they hope and they kind of know, but just to be able to be sure that people, I can actually see that person has progressed, and to be able to celebrate that with the people that we work with as well is really important. I know this is hard, but you actually feel like you feel you're doing better, and and so we found there's a lot of things in the staff motivation. Obviously, resource allocation, growth and innovation has been a thing as well, and problem solving and risk mitigation. Some of the things which I'll talk about as well is early identifiers of risk from a well-being, from measuring well-being at a certain point, like at entry to a service, can be really beneficial and can show you things of risk or safety, or actually, cases of someone going, I've come to your crisis accommodation and actually I'm a diabetic and I don't take my meds. Some of those things we've found have come out of our talks, and by measuring well-being and be able to do that, which is an early identifier of risk. Obviously, it's been really helpful for our funding relationships. And our demonstration of outcomes to our funders and to our supporters. We also use it a lot, and increasingly more in advocacy, to advocate for government to have more evidence-based program design, and to fund different programs as well. And yeah, it gives us positions for outcomes, payment by outcomes contracts, which is a whole kettle of fish that we can talk about, and it's probably worth a couple hour session on its own. But we're seeing increasing trends from funders to not just report outcomes, but potentially pay by outcomes, and whether or not wellbeing has a place in that, I think will be soon to tell. So we call it impact measurement at Mission Australia. We've found that a strong brand name in an internal process and a kind of project really is a good idea. So that means that kind of everyone's using the same language, and so even though impact measurement is the brand, and whether or not it's actually impact and more outcomes, yes, but it has created a like everyone, you can ask someone in finance for us, and they're going to know what impact measurement is. And for us, it's a consistent, sustainable, and national approach to measuring outcomes, to know that we're making a difference in the lives of the people that we serve. And so, yeah, for us, it was really important that it was national, that it was scalable, and that we were able to get 480 different programs with, I don't know, we're on like 260 different contracts from 70 different funders or something like that. And to be able to understand what our collective impact was, and to be able to aggregate all those indicators up, and to actually meaningfully be able to say something about the homelessness sector or the AOD sector or whatever. And so for those kind of M&E people in the room, we have a kind of two sections to our impact measurement. One is on personal well-being. It's subjective well-being, and I'll talk to that in a minute, but also program outcomes. And so there are outcomes linked to usually a program logic or a theory of change. And yeah, those are the two kind of components of our impact measurement. But today I'm going to talk mostly about the well-being outcomes and the way that we measure well-being. But I just want you to know that there is actually other data that we collect, and yeah, and that there's kind of a two-prong approach. So this is how we do well-being. We use an index called the Personal Wellbeing Index. It's a measure of subjective well-being, and in other words, it's a person's satisfaction with their own life. So it's really subjective, and that's fine. It's come out of actually Deakin University in Melbourne, and it's been tested in 50 countries. And the interesting thing about the PWI is here in Australia is that there's been like 32 representative surveys of the Australian population, so over the past kind of 20 years. And so we've got a really good idea of an average Australian's well-being. And we can see they've done analysis on, the impact of the GFC happening for an average Australian's well-being, and the impact of 9/11, and, so on and so forth. And so we can, it's quite interesting to think about the well-being in the context, even though it's not a target. I think for our clients, it's interesting to, it's not a benchmark, but to see how it compares to, an average Australian. And so I'll show you some of that data as well today. I think the interesting thing for the PWI is that it's short. It's 8 questions. It's don't overthink it. It's how, however a person interprets those questions is usually is right. And I think for us, it's sensitive enough to measure improvements in well-being kind of longer than 3 months, not shorter than that, but most of our services go for 3 months or longer anyway. So we find that we actually can improve and see some change in well-being for our services. So in terms of practicalities, because this is a practitioner session, it's kind of entry and exit. It's pretty standard methodology for case management practice, which is the bulk of really what we do. So it becomes part of the wellbeing questionnaire, becomes the impact measurement questionnaire, becomes part of their entry and the way that a case plan is designed. So each person, obviously in case management, when someone comes in, they have a needs assessment and a number of things. And so this is part of their needs assessment. And our case managers are trained to design a case plan with the client in a way that not just meets their immediate needs for housing, but also thinks about their more holistic wellbeing needs and their other needs that might come out in the survey. And so there might be some, and we found that using this method is I don't think there's things that wouldn't come out in normal case management practice, like, I'm a diabetic and I'm not taking my meds. But I think that we have seen that we've been able to find things out earlier. Things like, possible, apprehended violence orders against, actually I got a boyfriend who, who can't come within so-and-so, meters of me. And so those things come out faster because we have a more holistic questionnaire, I think. And then it's also done at the end. And for longer term case management, we do follow-up surveys. And so they're usually, the best timing is with a case review. When you're reviewing that case management plan, when you're checking in on whether or not you need to change it. And so usually that's when another a follow-up impact measurement would be conducted. For our social housing tenants, where there is no real exit, because in many cases they live in our social housing, we do that annually for them, and then we can some interesting things that are happening with our social housing tenants. So we might have, in Coffs Harbour, in one of the areas, kind of regional towns of Australia, we have 1,000 properties in our social housing just in Coffs Harbour. And so when we're able to survey the well-being of our tenants who live in Coffs Harbour, we're able to understand the strengths and the needs of that particular cohort, and we design community development plans around that, and then and also interestingly follow up people who have poor well-being, and that's a whole nother conversation. But we've found that the people who have the poorest well-being are not necessarily the people that you would expect. And so I think it debunked a whole lot of our assumptions about whether or not are the people who don't pay their rent on time are the ones with poor well-being. Actually, no, they're not. The ones who have poor well-being in some of our housing areas are actually the ones who pay their rent on time, but maybe are going to a loan shark to do so. And so from other, they're actually, and they pass their housing inspections, they're all really polite and they look after their accommodation. But, some people are really struggling, but they're kind of, so those are kind of insights that we've, and it's really changed the way that we work with our housing tenants, because, this assumption that it's not just the noisy ones who need help. It might be the ones who are quiet and not saying, who seem to have it all okay. And so just trying to encourage our staff to dig a little deeper when they talk to people, and those people who are more isolated. And so those are kind of things that have been surprising from this particular approach for our housing tenants. So what do we do? Like I said, it's all about the why. We work really, really hard to push a whole lot of capacity and understanding and ownership of this into our front lines. We have champions, and we do e-learning modules, and we kind of we take people on a really kind of a structured, fast. It's kind of fast. It's kind of 8 weeks of from nothing to having an impact measurement approach. And so we've actually been able to develop at scale a roll-on that we can actually onboard probably 100 services a year. And I have a team. In that particular team, it's a team of 2 people. So 2 people can, it's really one person who does it, can onboard 100 services a year in using this kind of approach. And yeah, it's working for the most part. I think, yeah, I guess that's it. It is working for the most part. We've been doing it now for about really at scale for kind of 4 years now. And I would say that probably in the last, I don't know, maybe 12, we've had a bit of a dip in enthusiasm, I would say. And so we're having to re-engage and, you know, pick up all those champions that were trained, and, you know, that kind of onboard, that kind of next level of engagement and maturity, that it's not just about the onboarding and not just about the survey design, but it's about the learning. And so we're having to reinvigorate that journey. Yeah, so what do we do? Practically, it's just a lot of comms. It's a lot of storytelling. And I think also we've really got to learn, we've really noticed that you can't use it for performance management, actually. You use it because you need to, it's about that why, and it's coming back to that why and saying, actually, we're not going to hold you to a certain standard. We're not going to say that, you know, someone who's who's coming out of a crisis accommodation needs to get to a wellbeing standard of equivalent to the Australian population. Like, we're not actually going to set targets for you. And so what we do is we make them do the surveys. It's like, well, you know, we don't have to, your people don't have to get to a certain level. They don't have to show a certain level of progress. What you have to do is you have to conduct the surveys, and you have to learn. And so you have to demonstrate that there's some kind of learning around. And so I'll tell you about that as well in a second. But so it's really about, you know, you can't control if a particular region has lost all the jobs in, you know, maybe a factory is shut down. And so it's like, we can't hold our services accountable for people in a whole community losing their jobs, and therefore their well-being kind of plummets. But what we can hold them accountable for is to know why. And, you know, you need to know what's going on in community, and you need to know why, you know, something like that has happened. And so it's really trying to really just dive into that learning, and the demonstration of the learning and the so what of it is really important. So we show a lot of, you know, as many as we can, tell stories. We've got, you know, e-learning modules and lots of things on, you know, the internet, and just trying to make sure that people have everything they need to be able to learn. So I guess also at operating at scale, it needs to be really automated. And depending on how data nerdy the people here are, there needs to be kind of a standardized process. And I mentioned that there was a kind of an 8-week onboarding process, but you need to make sure that the way that your data is structured is able to be refreshed and seen very regularly, so that someone who, you know, what you can see on the screen here is a participant with a low score. And so one of the questions in the wellbeing survey is how satisfied are you with your safety, your personal safety? And so as soon as someone clicks submit on a wellbeing survey, this is a notification to the caseworker and to the line manager that actually there's a risk here. This person have said that they have a satisfactory rating of 2 out of 10, which we know, because there's lots of data on this, that there's a high likelihood of depression, and so it's kind of like, you need to act on this immediately, and so that's in real time. And we're able to, and it has helped us identify risks faster, and to be much more transparent about the risk management of clients who are coming into our services, who are, you know, oftentimes really facing some really difficult challenges, and to make sure that we're able to look after them and keep them safe. Yeah, so this is where we're at. We've got 1,000 staff involved at the moment, and you can see the gradual progression of, we started off in 2015 with 12, and and have, now we're onboarding about 100 a year. And any influx of is because we've had services start and finish on that. So we're at, about 20,000 responses for wellbeing and outcomes measurement for our people, for the people that we work with, for about 13,000 clients. So we're getting some good numbers in terms of statistics, and we're able to now, once you've kind of got a large enough sample, to be able to do things with not just at the individual level, but at the aggregate. Don't forget, I'm about to kind of finish, and I'd love to have questions if anyone's got any. So I'll just show you. So we have interactive dashboards, and so it also means that I think this is really important, that for a frontline worker, that they don't just feel like the data is going off to the ether, that you send it off to national office and then it never comes back again. So we have worked really hard to try and make sure that people are able to see their data pretty much in real time. And as you can see here, there's no red, amber, green, there's no targets, it's yellow and purple. And that's a deliberate design choice to make sure that we are not, because we're not trying to reach anything. We're not trying to, what we're trying to see is improvement, and we want to teach learning. And I'm really conscious of that kind of perverse incentive of, of setting targets around this stuff. And so I think this is probably something that probably keeps me up at night, frankly, to make sure that we treat everyone as an individual and treat everyone's circumstance, as they are, and to make sure that we're not, kind of doing anything like that. And also to make sure that the caseworkers use it for learning, and not as a measurement of their own kind of performance as a caseworker. So I think that transparency is really important, so that a frontline worker can actually see the same data that I can as their boss can, and that there's kind of no secrets as well. Although I would say that we do only show results for areas that they're accountable for. So a program manager can only see their program, and an area manager who might manage, like, I don't know, 10 or so programs, can only see their area. And I don't know whether or not we'll change that. It's probably something I need to think about more. There might be some kind of benefits in the transparency, but I'm a bit hesitant about the comparison factor. And so I'm just telling you how it is. Hope that's okay. So anyone data nerdy, because it's like, actually, how do you do that with the data? It's really important to us as well that we don't ask our clients, we don't ask them more than once a particular question, and we reduce double data entry. And so, once, it's like in once and then use it multiple times. And so you can see these blue people. The blue people are our people, the people that we work with. And so we combine the impact measurement survey with case notes in the warehouse. And so we have a warehouse that's structured, and that happens pretty instantaneously. And then we're able to, through an SQL, and to join that data together in the warehouse, so that we're able to push it into our dashboards for people to use at any time. But we also use that same source of truth from the warehouse to, DIES in Australia. And so we've got federal reporting requirements. We've got lots of reporting requirements from lots of different funders. And so we will transform our data from the warehouse into formats that suit our funders. And so, and I guess that's probably, for a big organization with lots of funding obligations, I would say that that's a strong learning from us as well. about making sure that the data is our data first, and that we're not a mini arm of government. And so we don't silo our data reporting requirements for a particular program to a particular funder too far up that we can't use it ourselves. And so I think that that's been a real deliberate choice. And I think it's probably been a difficult choice to make, because in some ways it's easier for each program to bespoke to their funder. But the problem with that is that you miss out on the learning. You miss out on all the other, other like services that don't use that particular funder to be able to understand and to be able to improve. And so so we've actually had to work really hard in the last couple of years to make sure that our warehouse serves our needs first, and of course serves the funder needs, but that our needs are important, and that that the learning, we're able to aggregate that learning. Yeah, and so I would encourage you, if anyone is part of a big NGO and is struggling with their understanding their data from all their different, hundreds of programs or locations, or, I've worked in international as well. And so I think that this is a struggle that in a resource constrained environment that that we always have. And I would encourage you to try and think about your own learning first, and a way that you can do it that sets you up for the long term, to become a place that actually can grow and understand, and in 5 years time or in 10 years time or however long it takes, that actually that kind of journey is worth it. Yeah. Oh yeah, and probably the other thing to notice is from a data perspective, whoever's data person in the room, we structure all out the warehouse around a client, and so the client becomes the center of the warehouse, and so it gives us a really client-centric view, rather than a program-centric view or a cost code or something like that. So we're really, because what is interesting for us is, from this learning perspective, is about our clients' journey through our programs. So, looking at it, not just a person, accessing one service in isolation, but that person as someone who lives in a community. What is their interactions with us in that community where we might have multiple programs? Like, is there anything that we can learn about their referrals, or make sure that we can support them better? And so that client over time is a really important way that we have structured our warehouse and structured our data. And I would encourage anyone to do that too. All right, so enough from me. Questions on this stuff? Brett.
Yes, so I think we've got some in the lineup there. And so if anyone else has some, please feel free to pop them in the chat. If you have a longer question or you want to ask it in person, feel free to maybe put a message in the chat that says, I have a question, so then we can call on you and you can unmute yourself. But let's get started with a question from Alyssa, who is asking, amazing integration throughout the organization. How was that done?
By I don't know, a lot of selling. I guess it's just coming back to that why. Like, in a not-for-profit, everyone is there because they want to make a difference. There's a reason we don't work for banks. There's a reason we don't work for, I don't know, whatever, the local store. We're all in this because we believe that society can be a better place. And so when you really, every single conversation, so this is the conversation I have with the IT guy who may not want to, structure, it's like, oh, the rate, it's going to be hard. I'm like, well, why? This is the why. And we just keep talking about the why, and we just keep talking about it. And I think that's how it was done. The why at the board, the why at the CEO, the why at the IT guy, the why in a remote program in a caseworker in Broken Hill, which is out in the middle of nowhere in the red dust. It's all about the why. Everyone is there for the same purpose, and it's because they actually believe that they want to see change in the world. And so you just go there. So Alyssa, I'm not sure whether or not that answers your question. Do you want to say anything else? Brilliant. You can come off mute and talk to me if you like. Actually, this is really weird. Someone had a question about what program did you use for the dashboard? So these dashboards here, is that what you mean? Maybe you can come off mute and like, if you want to.
Yeah, I think it was the one that you had a couple slides ago where you were showing, oh, there we go. Oh, different person. A couple slides ago, but yeah, I think it was the data management platform that you were using.
This one?
I think that's when the question came through, yeah.
Okay. So this is a standard dashboard for everyone. So it's not just a particular, oh, what program did you use? This is Power BI. So we're in the Microsoft suite. So our CRMs are in Dynamics 365. We use Microsoft data warehouses, and yeah, that's a question you're wanting. And yeah, and so we use Power BI. And so this is the Wellbeing dashboards. So they're standard, but we use dashboards for a whole lot of things, which is a whole nother thing in itself about getting non-data people to use dashboards. But we can talk about that another time too.
Right, yeah, we've got another question here. Did you have challenges in having that why mindset? If so, how did you instill that among the team?
Oh yeah, like challenge. Like I don't have challenges having that why mindset. People think that oh Rachel, you're such an idealist. It's like, I've been doing this a while now, and I guess I am an optimist, but I just keep banging on about it, and it doesn't matter if they. And I guess you hit a few people who kind of hit that cynical. Been doing it a long time, and are really kind of stuck in that deliver to the funder. And I think probably that's the big challenge of when it becomes more about delivering to a funder contract than actually necessarily. I'll actually talk a little bit about that in our results, but our funder contracts that I know about, international people are sometimes really outputty focused. Like all they're wanting is just bums on seats and people in beds, and this kind of question of whether or not someone is better off is actually not even unasked of a funder. And so you really do need to inspire people, and we've got a whole lot of some people instantly get it. Marika, I think her name is, and so some people will instantly get it, and they're on that bell curve of early adopters, and they're like, yep, I get it. And you got program managers like, yep, I get it. And you'll always have those people who are like, actually, this is too hard. This is another process that I have to do. It's not in my contract. So thank you, no. And so those have probably been some of the challenges, frankly, honestly.
All right. Another question from Di. I really liked how you spoke about reporting of impact and outcomes. Tendering and funding can change, which can then end up driving it instead of the vision and the why.
I totally agree. And I think it becomes, for a big NGO, you can actually, sometimes you can, this is not really for Mission Australia, but I feel like sometimes you can kind of lose your way a little bit sometimes, and be so driven by the funders' wants that you have to kind of re-find yourself, and that actually, who are we independent of our funding and our funding relationships, and who are we, and what is the vision that we want for Australia or for the area that you're working in. And I think that as part of the senior leadership here at Mission Australia, I think that's something that I've been doing this for, I don't know, 30 years or something, and so it's easy to get lost in the doing and forgetting about those real reasons why we actually are in this job in the first place. Alyssa's in her dressing gown. That's fine. I'm actually, I was going to say I'm in my thongs, but in Australia that means something different than it does for you guys. It's my flip-flops. So it's probably
another question here. Have you seen a cultural shift in the organization parallel to this?
Yes. I would say it's anecdotal at the moment, but there's lots of things going on at the moment as well. We've got a new strategy that's been rolled out, but I guess I suppose it's that culmination of living by your values, actually. And so we have all these values in NGOs about the things that we want to achieve and the way that we want to achieve it. And it's not just programs like impact measurement, but do matter, but it's also things about the tenders you go for, and the way that you talk about the people that you work with, and the way that you advocate to government, and the things that you say. All of those things really are things that I think are really important for your culture, and it's a culmination of all of those things that actually can actually start shifting. And so I would say that we've had a shift in our culture for sure, but whether or not it's an attribution, attributable to impact measurement itself, or I would say it's probably more of a reflective of an organizational decision to pursue a particular path.
Mm-hmm. And you know what, Di, you've got your hand up there, so I'm assuming that you're going to unmute.
Hi everyone. Rachel, I was really curious. For me, next year I'm going to look at driving a bit more participatory involvement. I work in mental health, and what I'm finding and seeing, and obviously there's a lot of homelessness within my sector, is that quite frequently it's still top down. So what I guess the focus that I'm really passionate about is the bottom-up driving and far more participatory process in finding out what people need, what is their concept of well-being, safety, etc.
Yeah, that's hard, and I think that that to be in having to face that, to look at that with integrity, and to be able to get people's active participation and then do something about it is really and do something with that is really challenging in an environment where you may not have the ability to dictate what your contract looks like and what the outcomes look like. And I hear, and gonna move on to our results, but I think that is a challenge, and I'm with you, and we're trying to do more of that within the kind of limited scope that we've got. I
think it's you're spot on, but I guess when you work with the people that are, forgive the term, frequent flyers, I think there needs to be something different done.
That's the only way we're going to see change, and it's that, and I think approaches like this makes it, and I guess I haven't really seen a government change their mind because of something I've showed them yet. I'm hopeful that this kind of approach becomes essentially irrefutable at some stage, that that they actually can't argue with it anymore.
I think there's really a lot of strength in the immediacy of your results that you can pull. I think that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing.
No, yeah, and it's been because a lot of this kind of like long-term stuff takes ages to actually accumulate. You got to get enough sample, and you got to get enough learning and analysis and blah 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 to get that early adoption. You really need to make it immediately useful for the frontline worker, and make sure that they are getting the benefit out of it straight up, because they're the one who have to put it in. I guess I want to talk through. Please put stuff in the chat. I'm conscious of time. And do we only have 5 more minutes?
Yeah,
Brett?
5 more minutes.
Oh no. I haven't really got to. Essentially, we've done driver analysis on which is multiple regression, to understand whether or not well-being is to what particular element of well-being is most important for our homelessness clients. And obviously standard of living has is really important, and I'll share these slides with you as well, but you can also see that the achievement of life is really high determinant of whether or not someone's well-being actually shifts, whether or not they feel more satisfied with their life as a whole. So you can see that that standard of living is high, but there's these two really high other elements for an average person that really matters to whether or not they feel better. And so I'll probably jump through this one. So I guess the thing probably what I want to say is that I mentioned that our current environment doesn't have a holistic approach to well-being. The housing is really separate for us. Jobs are really separate, and it's a real shift towards crisis. And so we have been working really hard to change our case managers' practice within the specialist homelessness services to not just look at their immediate place to sleep, but also their other achievements in life, like you as a person. What else do you want with your life? If you had a house, what would you do? And so we've spent a lot of time, probably since mid 2008 and 18, and this is kind of goes to the cultural shift about housing being a human right. Sorry, I'm going fast. And we can actually see that when, because we had started measuring impact on impact measurement before we, in a midpoint, we're actually able to see this is the satisfaction with their achievement in life, that second driver of well-being. And we can actually see that when we instituted that that change of focus on a more holistic case plan, that that we actually can. So the purple are people's average entry scores, which have remained fairly stable for this particular domain. But you can see that once we paid more attention to people's achievements in a holistic setting, we were able to increase their well-being as a result. And those statistically significant changes for the data nerds in the room. And so I guess this is where we're at the moment with my last minute and a half. So you can see that in terms of well-being, that we do see statistically significant increases in well-being for our homeless clients. And you can see the purple is the average on entry, and the pink is the average on exit. The blue line says the normative range for the Australian population. And so you can see that while some exits on average aren't within the normative range, just gives you some indication of the level of average well-being that this kind of approach is able to send people out into the world into. The circles are the drivers, the top 3 drivers. So we've got a little bit of work to do. I think we could probably still work on that achieving in life driver. But you can see that this kind of creates a pretty compelling story for funders to not just put roofs over people's heads, but actually have a more holistic approach to their service and interactions with you. Sorry, it's gone really fast, and Brett, you're out of time, but you can read that.
Well, and you know what? I think there's so much here that we could spend probably like a whole day just going through this deck because it's fascinating. I don't know if anyone has any, wants to do any follow-up, but maybe Rachel, if you want to put your information there, if they do have some follow-up that they want to do, because I know there's so much that we didn't get to. Oh, if you go back, maybe, yes, there we go. Perfect. And
honestly, I'd love to chat. I like people, and it's been really difficult just kind of talking to my laptop. So yeah, do email me.
Wonderful. And yeah, like Lisa said, amazing. The data was amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Rachel. And thank you for everyone who joined us today. I'll just say a final thank you from Social Value Canada and Social Value International for participating. If you want more amazing sessions, we've got stuff going around the clock, so be sure to check those out. And this has been recorded, so if you want to return and come back to it again, I know I will because there's so much information in there. You can do that if you've got a replay ticket. And so I'll invite you to take a look there, to take a look at other sessions. And finally, just say, so question from Vanessa, where do you get the email? It's at the bottom of the slide there. I'll just read it out if anyone can't, I'll just pop it in the chat really quickly as we wrap up. Mission Australia.
Yeah, I know that this stuff is hard. So, any kind of help I can provide to you to make your life a little bit easier, or this journey for you a little bit easier, I'm most happy to do, because, yeah.
Perfect. So yes, thank you and good morning for those of you in Australia, and it's my evening here, so good night wherever you are in the world. And I'll leave this open on the Zoom for a minute or two just so that everyone can grab that information if they need it. But see you later. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Brett.
Thank you.